Okay, so we're live. We're always live. Hello, everybody. My name is Yair, and I live here in Philadelphia. And today we have a special, let me just open my window here. We have a special Zoom with three amazing people that really have the privilege to talk to them and to meet them. And they're doing so much important work in terms of supporting Israel and fighting anti-Semitism. So before I introduce Julie, who will introduce everybody else, I just wanted to tell you that we are basically working. There's two organizations that I belong to, and that is sponsoring these events, these webinars. One of them is called Hope for Israel Alliance, which is basically an international organization that is pretty much everywhere in the world, Australia, most of the countries in Europe, Canada, United States, everywhere. And pretty much it's mostly Israelis and Jewish people who believe in three mutual commons, which is to support Israel, do everything for Israel, to fight anti-Semitism, and to support Israel as a democracy, as a strong democracy. I also am a physician, so I'm also part of an organization called the American Jewish Medical Association that really is uniting all of the healthcare providers, nurses, physicians, trainees, and more to fight anti-Semitism and support Israel in all of the organizations. So with that, I wanted to introduce Julie. I have a lot to say about Julie, but I'll try to be quick for the sake of time. So Julie Paris, she is the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director of Stand With Us. And Stand With Us is an international, I'm sure that most of you know, an international nonpartisan education organization that supports Israel and also fights anti-Semitism. It empowers, energizes students, communities all over the world, high schools, middle schools, college. And, there's a lot to say. It was formed almost 25 years ago, and they're nonprofit and 501c3. And because of that, it's just very important to let you know that this is a non-political conversation. And I know we were just talking before, all four of us, about how, pretty much everything is dragging us immediately in all WhatsApp groups and all conversations straight to the politics, Trump and, Harris and everything. But we're going to try to keep the politics away. So Stand With Us. They do a lot of work. They respect Israel's democracy, like I mentioned, and their goal is to counter anti-Semitism, educate the public about Israel, empower others to educate their communities, basically, teach and form conversations about the history, policies, humanitarian situation in Israel, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, Julie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Yair, for the introduction, and thanks for arranging this webinar and so many other important webinars over the last year. So it is my great honor and privilege to be with all of you this evening, and in particular, to be with our two special guests who will be providing an overview on some of the contemporary anti-Semitism that we're seeing today, the roots of it on campus and in our communities, the legal tools that Stand With Us has at its disposal to support you, and answer any questions that we may have of when anti-Semitism, sort of when we identify it, and also when criticism of Israel or incidents affecting Jewish students and community members crosses that line and how we can address it. So I want to first introduce Rona. So Rona is not only a dear friend of mine, she's also a distinguished law professor and advocate. She has recently transitioned from women's jurisprudence to confronting anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism on college campuses. With a profound understanding of legal principles and the impacts of discrimination, she equips individuals with tools to counter anti-Zionist narratives and foster supportive environments for Jewish students. She has recently taken on a series of videos. So if you don't follow her on social media, you can find her at Professor Rona Kaufman. Many of those videos are done in collaboration with Stand With Us and give short, I would say under 5-minute descriptions on how to combat the most dangerous blood libel and anti-Israel narratives that we see today. And it is also my great privilege to introduce my colleague, Didi Bitran. Didi is Senior Counsel and Director of our Pro Bono Network at the Stand With Us State-Off Legal Department. Didi is an accomplished litigator and a passionate advocate for Jewish communities facing anti-Semitic and anti-Israel activities. As Senior Counsel at Stand With Us, she leads the State-Off Legal Department's Employment Law and Pro Bono Network, providing legal support and practical resources to those confronting bias and discrimination. She is also of counsel at Schutz and Bowen LLP, Miami's oldest law firm. So she is based in Miami. Great to be with you both tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Rona. Rona, if you can just give a little bit of an overview of your story briefly, and also how you feel that anti-Semitism has changed and what you're seeing on campus today.
Okay. So I'm Rona. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Julie, and thank you for having us, Yair. I am Jewish. I'm Zionist. I've always been a very, very strong Zionist. My parents are Israeli. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors. My daughter served as a lone soldier in a combat unit. She was just recently released. I'm very connected to Israel and have spent a ton of time there. That's my Jewish piece. My law piece is that I was a lawyer once upon a time. I practiced commercial litigation, employment discrimination, and family law in Houston, Texas. I haven't practiced law since 2007. I transitioned to academia at that point. And like you said, most of my career in academia, my scholarly focus has been on intersections of law and women. And I've taught many different courses, but right now I teach constitutional law, employment discrimination, family law, and gender in the law. Post October 7th, I dramatically shifted my scholarship, but that shift was already in the works for a few years, where I was very much aware of how within academia, and specifically within my corner, which is feminist legal theory, an anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic narrative was growing and becoming very mainstream. And I was aware of this, really for a very long time, probably for 15 years or so. I've been aware of this kind of growing problem, but like many, I didn't take it as seriously as I should have. And I thought, oh, reasonable people aren't going to believe these things. Of course, you can't just rewrite history and change an entire history of a people to appeal to some kind of an anti-Semitic movement. But anyway, I was wrong. And so since October 7th, I've really completely shifted. And so the way that the lens through which I'm looking at a lot of the anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is still through a gendered lens. And unfortunately, so much of what happened on October 7th was gendered violence. And it's based on a history of gendered violence that has been committed against Jewish women for thousands of years through pogroms that were taking place throughout the world, really. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Thank you so much. And Didi, can you just talk briefly about how you've been an activist for a long time. Your role in Stand With Us is relatively new. Can you tell us about your experience as an activist and how you transitioned to the role of working full-time in the nonprofit sphere of supporting specifically people who are facing discrimination at work?
Sure. I wanted to say thank you again for having me. This is such an honor, and I'm happy to be here with such awesome panelists. I thought that I was going to go into this line of work. It's weird to even call it work because it's not work when you love what you do and it's super fulfilling. And I feel like every day I get to work on meaningful projects. So I hate calling it work. When I was in law school almost a decade ago, I had a classmate of mine who was sitting next to me in class, and I saw on her social media, she posted "Stab Jews because there are oppressors." And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I just recommended this person for moot court because I thought, based on the merits, she was great. Why not? And it hit me like a brick wall that somebody could hate me and advocate "Stab Jews because there are oppressors," advocate for killing me solely because of the blood running through my veins. So that kind of lit a spark in me. And I remember I complained, I brought it all the way up the ladder in the administration. And, I spoke with the dean, who's no longer the dean. I spoke with the president, who's no longer the president. And they didn't really do anything. They just said freedom of speech, let it be. That drove me nuts because anti-Semitism is not something that we can or should tolerate anywhere. And universities should be using their freedom of speech to condone anti-Semitic behavior, to condemn it, to explain that they don't support this type of rhetoric, and to teach students how to be professionals and coexist peacefully. So I ended up writing an article titled "Anti-Israel is a Camouflage Platform for Anti-Semitism." And that article got published in my school's law review. It won an award in Canada. It made its way, all over the world. And it seemed like such a novel, crazy concept. But nowadays, we hear it all the time. Anti-Israel rhetoric is being used in a way that is anti-Semitic. And it's the new trend of how to attack Jews, but say, oh, no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-Israel. I'm just criticizing policies, but trying to hold Jews accountable. So that lit the spark in me to want to do Israel advocacy work. I did go into private practice for the past 9 years, and I've enjoyed it. I've cultivated the skill sets that I've needed. I've always been very pro-Israel, and I've done everything I can in terms of taking pro bono assignments. But after October 7th, something in me I needed more. And that's why I eventually ended up at Stand With Us. I really wanted to make sure that I did as much as I could to combat anti-Semitism. And it was a hard decision because I love my firm. I'm still of counsel there. They're excellent, Miami's oldest law firm. But I really wanted to make sure that all day, every day, I was fighting anti-Semitism and doing my part, not just for me, but for all the Jews nationwide. Because if anti-Semitism is tolerated in one place, it spreads like a cancer, like a wildfire. So anywhere that anti-Semitism sprouts up, I think it's important that we call it out. And that's why I'm now senior counsel at Stand With Us, but I'm also the director of our pro bono network. If there's any attorneys, anyone on this call who knows an attorney who wants to also help, please reach out to me. I'm sure our emails will be provided. I would love to discuss further what we do at Stand With Us and the pro bono opportunities, how lawyers can get involved. People can be as involved or uninvolved as they want. So it's a great opportunity.
So I actually have maybe the first question is to you, Didi. And this is because what Julie has been doing, what I'm doing, I'm not related to any legal organization or anything, but I speak with a lot of people from the community, and we see a lot of anti-Semitism. And now I'm going to ask you a question more in terms of employment, because a lot of people, including myself, we work in big enterprises or institutions, and we sometimes face real scary anti-Semitism that makes us really uncomfortable as employees, as co-employees, even if it's not directed at us directly. And often, we're kind of shrugging and we're talking to each other and we don't really know what to do about it. So maybe in this session, Rona and yourself can give us maybe practical tools. I mean, I know some people know a little bit about Title VI, Title VII, but let me start with an example that is kind of similar to what you said. I don't live in Philadelphia, I live in the suburb of Philadelphia, but the school district of Philadelphia has been, unfortunately, in the news for months now, because there are several teachers and directors of social studies, et cetera, that are, saying the most horrific, really anti-Semite, anti-Zionist things that you can imagine. And some of the people who are co-workers, employees in the same organization in the school district of Philadelphia are exposed to this. And the question that I have for you, what can be done about this? And I'll just show a little example, because many people nationally, and certainly the people around Philadelphia, know this teacher, that she has been on a mission nonstop. She's a teacher in the school district of Philadelphia. All that she does is attack Israel. And like you said, she's not anti-Semite. She just says Zionism is racism. It's racism. Give them back. And she says things like this, like above. From today, I stop using the term Israel. There's no Israel. And instead, I refer to that country as occupied state of Palestine. And, this has been causing, specifically her behavior, but others as well, has been causing so much distress to the community. Of course, to the parents, mostly to the parents, but also to the people who are teachers, Jewish teachers who are Zionists, because most of the Jewish people are Zionists in our blood, and they don't really know what to do. So I guess the first question to you, or Rona, or anybody, but I think we'll start with you, Didi, is what can we do about it?
This is an awesome question. Unfortunately, this comes up all the time. And I'm so sorry to hear that this is going on in the community. That's very troubling and concerning. So my first suggestion is to file an incident report with Stand With Us. And if it's okay with you, I'll send you the link and we can circulate it to everybody who's on this webinar. There's a website that you go to fill out an incident report. Stand With Us's legal team is unique in that each one of us is a subspecialist in a different field. So we have someone on our legal team who specializes in criminal law. So if the issue is stalking, vandalism, assault, she's the expert. And then we have someone on our team who works on kindergarten through 12th grade. Yes, you heard me correctly, kindergarten, because sometimes parents call us saying, you will not believe the stuff that my kid's kindergarten teacher is teaching in the classroom that has to do with anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. We have someone else on our team who specializes in campus, so college campuses. And then you have me, hi. I do employment law. So anytime that there's an employment issue, someone thinks that they're being discriminated against or harassed at work because they're either Jewish and or Israeli, that comes to me. So first and foremost, help us triage your issue to get you to the right attorney on our staff. So fill out an incident report. The right attorney on our staff will reach out to you, schedule an intake, and then we can go through the different options. As far as employment law, because that's my specialty, I'm happy to talk about that. So I want to specify, none of this is legal advice. I am an attorney, but I'm not suggesting in any way or commenting on a specific case right now. It's just in general. There's a law called Title VII. Title VII is a federal employment law, and it prohibits employers from discriminating against employees because of their protected class. So that includes religion, national origin, so Jewish and Israeli. They can't discriminate against someone because of their religion or national origin with regards to the privileges and terms and conditions of employment. Part of a privilege of employment is being able to work in a non-hostile work environment, right? So it's a very confusing, interesting, multi-factor analysis. There's no mathematical precise formula of what constitutes a hostile work environment. There's a ton of cases all over the place. Courts sometimes come out different ways on this. It is very hard to prove a hostile work environment. Courts look at how frequent the conduct is, whether it's physically threatening. They look at, does it interfere with the employee's work performance? There's an objective component and a subjective component. So they really look at it. Usually one incident is not enough. So if somebody looks at you and says, you dirty Jew, I hate you at work, a coworker, or even a third party, a customer says that, that likely is not going to be enough to carry the day for a hostile work environment claim. Unfortunately, the law does not provide a remedy for every single wrong. However, if somebody comes in and says, you dirty Jew, every single week, and somebody else starts drawing swastikas in the bathroom, and somebody else starts coming up to you and saying, you white colonizer, you stupid genocide baby killer. Yes, these are all things that we have heard, by the way, since October 7th. If every Heritage Month is celebrated, like there's Ramadan celebrated, Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and then if the Jewish employee says, hey, can we squeeze in Jewish Heritage Month? Is that okay? And the employer just says, no, thanks, we don't want to do that. And let's say the employer then says, please remove your Jewish star necklace, it's offending people. That's a hostile work environment. I mean, I can't say anything with certainty, but that would likely be enough. So it's really, it's not a mathematical test. Courts look at everything. Something like what you showed, the image of the teacher talking about Zionists, was that on her social media?
Yes, it's on her social media, but she's very vocal about it. And in fact, one of my friends who is from Lower Merion was in one of the hearings, and she attacked her, not physically, but she yelled at her and screamed at her and said horrible things into her face, like really scary.
So
But mostly social media.
Even things that occur outside of the workplace, like a social media posting, can still create a hostile work environment. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because a lot of people think, oh, I posted on my private social media, so it's not going to cause any issues, but it absolutely can. If the social media post is interacted with in the workplace, if it is referenced in the workplace, if it causes problems and effects in the workplace, it becomes the employer's business. And an employer is obligated under Title VII to intervene promptly and appropriately to make sure to address it. And if the employer just ignores, and there's a coworker who's saying, kill Zionists, Hitler was right. Yes, again, we've heard all of this, by the way, it's in the past year or so. Eventually, it does become incumbent on the employer to step in and do something about it, because that can create a hostile work environment. So not commenting on your specific example, but bird's eye view, an employer should be stepping in when those types of situations arise to prevent a hostile work environment claim.
And just to give a little bit of additional background on that, there has been a Title VI filed in that case in the school district of Philadelphia. That particular teacher was removed from her classroom for now and reassigned. We don't have the details of that. But we do know that she has a mass following, and that has sadly only grown since the more radicalized she's been, the more we've seen her following grow. And recently at a school board meeting, we saw a number of her students and community members and teachers show up in support of her. And so, we have to stay engaged. We have to stay in touch, and we have to use the legal resources at our disposal, as Dee Dee mentioned, to make sure that the school district is holding all of their teachers to whatever the standards that their employment rules and regulations permit. So thank you, but that's, it's a very difficult situation. And we know that Philadelphia School District is not alone in their challenges, and the Jewish parents are not alone. And that's why we're here to support them. So I want to just, if it's okay, just turn back to Rona and just go into the questions of anti-Semitism. To be able to fight it, I'm asking Sandy's question, to be able to fight anti-Semitism, we have to understand where it comes from. Why do you think that over the past several years, we have seen an increase in academic anti-Semitism?
Great question. I think what we are seeing just over the last few years is actually the anti-Semitism that has finally escaped just academia, and it has made it out into the world, which is the way many, many ideas come into media and social media and, all sorts of other social institutions. And so, there are a few different roots to it, is the reality of it. It's not just one, it's not coming from just one direction. I think what we certainly know is that this has been a many decades long campaign. So if we go back to the 1970s, when the Zionism is racism event is taking place at the United Nations, and when you have basically academics who have been working with Middle Eastern leaders developing a theory which is going to undermine the existence of the state of Israel, the legitimacy of the state of Israel, this was all part of a very concerted effort. And it was born basically in academia, but it was born decades ago. And the reality is that I don't know why we didn't take it terribly seriously. But basically, you now have many decades of tremendous funding of various centers at different universities that have essentially been turning out academic papers that are theorizing this anti-Zionist, anti-Israel version of anti-Semitism. So it's, of course, based in the idea that Jews are white colonizers that appeared from Europe, that Jews are originally European, that after the Holocaust, which also is generally believed to be the single terrible event that ever happened to the Jewish people, after the Holocaust, all of these European refugees came to Palestine, stole the land from the indigenous population, committed a mass event of ethnic cleansing wherein they murdered and massacred and kicked out approximately 750,000 Arabs living in that land, and then established a state. And that is a totally false history. I mean, it's a completely false history. And yet, this is the history that is literally being written in academic articles, in academic texts, and then it grows from there, right? So it has this foundation of how Israel is established as a white settler enterprise, and then it continues from there, right? Then we get the whole apartheid argument that Israel is an apartheid state. Now we hear that Israel is committing genocide, also not new, right? So this is really interesting. I mean, Israel, according to these activists and revisionists of history, Israel has been committing genocide also for decades. This is not new. Now, which is really interesting because, of course, the population of Arabs, both in Israel, as well as in Judea, Shomron, as well as in the Gaza Strip, has only grown in this time. In any event, that's one foundation for it. I think it's not the only foundation. I think we have to layer that on top of kind of a Marxist ideology of oppressor, oppressed, that basically splits everyone up into those who oppress and those who are oppressed. And Jews are part of the oppressor group. And the reason that Jews are part of the oppressor group, it's kind of a backwards reasoning. Basically, this is all coming also, this part is coming very much from an American viewpoint. People who look at America and they look at who is successful in America and they see many successful Jews. It's not limited to America, but certainly in America where half the world's Jews live, Jews have had success. If you are successful under this ideology, it means that you have created a corrupt system that is oppressing others. Therefore, if Jews are successful, they are the oppressors. Dee mentioned this story from law school. So I went to law school earlier than Dee, but I'll tell you that I went to law school and it was in the late 1990s. And at the time, I was the president of the Jewish Law Student Association. And I was friends with all the other kind of affinity and minority law student group presidents. It was a small law school. And there was a minority law student association that was an umbrella organization over the various different minority groups. But there were two groups that weren't in that minority law student association. It was the Jewish law students and the gay and lesbian law students. So times were different culturally. At the time, the idea that gays and lesbians were a minority and that that wasn't a lifestyle, that was still very controversial. So they were not allowed into this group because they were engaging in a lifestyle choice. The Jews were not allowed into this group because we were not a real minority. And both I and the president of the gay and lesbian organization, we didn't know. We thought it was just an accident that we weren't part of this organization. So we went and we said, can we join? We want to be part of this. Like, why not? Right? And so here I had students telling me, right, I'm probably one of the only people in the law school whose grandparents' whole families were murdered for being of a particular group of people. You know, people have experienced different forms of discrimination, but I'm pretty sure no one had experienced that form. And I was very clearly told, oh, you're not a minority. And I very foolishly, I was like, okay, I don't understand, you know, whatever, but like, why don't you want to let us in? They're like, you're too successful. And I was like, well, what are you worried about? They said, we're worried about you taking our scholarships. So I said, okay, we won't take your scholarships. Can we be in now? Which was honestly an unnecessary concession for me to make, but I didn't even understand. Now I understand. This ideology has been there a long time. So I think if you take this Marxist ideology on the one hand, and then you just take plain simply, I mean, the Arab world doesn't want a Jewish state in that region at all. They want, you know, only Arab countries. It's very offensive to have a Jewish state in the middle of the Arab world. You take these two ideologies, you put them together, and now here we are watching an explosion of an ideology that has been growing and evolving, and its tentacles have reached kind of everywhere. And it's very problematic because you have this in textbooks, in authoritative academic texts. You have a revisionist history, and then you have basically this other oppressor, you know, oppressed ideology.
This is very helpful and interesting, and I think that we've seen what you're describing, this mentality or assumption of oppressors and oppressed, and we see that again and again. We've had webinars about this. I mean, just in my neighborhood, one of the biggest, and we've talked about it before, one of the biggest healthcare systems, their DEI basically came up with on the newsletter, the monthly newsletter, a big article, 2 pages about how horrible Israel is and the damage that they're doing to Palestine. Clearly, the oppressor versus the oppressed narrative. And also, just in the last few weeks here in our school district, the public school district, one of the board members of the school district basically went very aggressively against another board member and said, you know, all Jews are white. They are saying that they're white. And it kind of fits the, you know, we, the Jews, are white, we're oppressors, the Palestinians are oppressed, etc. And that's a problem. You know, you're talking about what you have done, the student association that you had, and the LGBT. One of the things that we're doing in the American Jewish Medical Association is basically trying to deploy or to encourage all the healthcare systems to create the Jewish ERG, Employee Resource Group, to really unite ourselves and not to be isolated and feel well together and equipped to fight together against anti-Semitism. So my next question is to Didi. And, you know, I think Julie was mentioning in a couple of words, Title VI, and you mentioned before Title VII. Maybe you can give us a little bit of just, you know, very briefly what it means for us to laymen to understand what really is Title VI and maybe there's other terms that we should be aware of. And then the second question that I wanted to talk to you about, I gave you an example before about the, the school district of Philadelphia, but now I'll give you an example from my enterprise, a healthcare enterprise, which we've seen these anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism on a micro level. Again, an employee who is a nurse practitioner, an OBGYN, all day, all night, whenever she can in her free time, she posts horrible things on social media. There was never, and we've talked about it in different webinars. There was October 7th, but the Hamas never raped. The only people who were raped, the Palestinian women by the IDF. Horrible lies. And then on the other side, a lot of physicians are aware that it's kind of almost like a movement of pro-Palestinian physicians who go to Gaza and they work in Gaza and they come back and they give series of lectures that are unbelievably biased and so horrible. And at my institution, we had an event like this that was approved by administration. I personally participated because I wanted to hear, and it was the worst hour, and I've never sat in a room that I felt so much hatred. So again, and me and other employees, this was supported by the enterprise, by the university, by DEI. Is there anything that we can do, Title VI, Title VII, stand with us to help with cases like this, like the ones that I've described? Again, not going individually into the cases.
I like that caveat. So first and foremost, fill out an incident report because every case turns on the specific facts, right? So we really want to make sure that we analyze each case very carefully and very specifically. I get calls like this all day, and sometimes it's as simple as writing a letter to the employer, putting them on notice. The key here is under Title VII, and I promise, like you said, I'll go into the differences, but Title VII governs employment law land, right? So if you're an employee, Title VII is your law. And Title VII requires an employer to do something when the employer notices discrimination or harassment, unlawful discrimination or harassment in the workplace. So you have to make sure that you put your employer on notice, right? Because if the employer says, the lecture went great, nobody was offended, all went well, wash your hands clean, all is good. It's important that the employer knows, no, we have a problem, here's why. This is why your lecture is blatantly anti-Semitic. And sometimes a letter like that is really useful because let's say there's 10 more lectures like that. And let's say as a result of those lectures, employees start being obnoxious in the workplace towards Jews. Let's say, oh, I heard in the lecture that Israel's doing all this stuff. Hey, you're Israeli, go screw yourself. I hate you, da-da-da. If they start harassing employees because of the misinformation, the biased misinformation that is spread in those lectures, that can create a hostile work environment. So it is so important that we put the employer on notice saying, hey, what you're doing could create or contribute to a hostile work environment. And that letter will be Exhibit A when you or whoever wants to files a lawsuit later down the line to say the employer knew about this. The employer's response did nothing because the employer didn't take it seriously, right? So if an employer's response to a discrimination complaint is ineffectual, liability attaches. So it's really important to prove the employer knew about it and failed to act appropriately. Another question that you brought up had to do with DEI. A resource that we can offer at Stand With Us, which I think everybody should take advantage of, we would be so excited to help in this way, is we have a constitutional litigator on our staff in the legal department at Stand With Us. And she travels around the United States, meeting with DEI folks, meeting with administrators, meeting with general counsels, explaining what is and is not anti-Semitic. And I think that is so important because sometimes there's a gap in education, right? As Rona was saying, from college campuses, people are being indoctrinated, unfortunately, to live and breathe this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel rhetoric. So sometimes the employer or the DEI representatives just don't know. And it's really important to give them that opportunity to learn. She does not go in there being political. Stand With Us is not a politically affiliated organization. We're nonpartisan. She goes in there and just explains what is and is not anti-Semitic, gives a very good lecture, and works with them so that they understand and they can recognize in the workplace, wait a second, this horrible lecture talking about Israel this way and saying Jews are white colonizers, that's anti-Semitic. We should probably not allow this type of stuff. Another resource Stand With Us has is that we can help with counter programming. So if you want to go to your employer and say, okay, there was clearly a bias lecture going on here, I'd like to put on a lecture showing the other side. We can help with those resources. We're happy to help with that. another thing that you brought up was Title VI versus Title VII. Title VII is your employment law jam, right? And it's really important to make sure that you file an incident report with us because every state could have different laws. So Title VII is federal. States have state law components or counterparts to Title VII. So for example, in Florida, there's the Florida Civil Rights Act. I'm based in Miami, so I'm going to cheat and go off of Florida because I know it best. The Florida Civil Rights Act applies to employers, and it includes additional protected classes that are not included in the federal law. So it expands protections. Other state laws, they apply to employers with less employees. So for example, the federal law, Title VII, applies if there's 15 or more employees. Some state laws and even county ordinances, city ordinances, they make employers apply, they make their laws apply to employers. So they'll say this applies to 5 or more employees. If you have 5 or more employees under the federal law, you don't have to answer to Title VII, but guess what? You can still be held liable under the state law component. Title VI, that is not my specialty, but it is the specialty of a different attorney on our Stand With Us legal team. Title VI has to do with when there's federal funds. So for example, a lot of these universities take federal funding, and if students experience hostile environments on campuses, Title VI is usually their remedy. However, I've seen it a different way. I know of somebody suing Rutgers actually, who's suing under state law. So it really depends. It's so important that an attorney analyzes what is the best avenue. For Title VI, it goes to the Office of Civil Rights. For Title VII, it goes to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So different government entities, different laws, completely different approaches. I love Title VII. I think that a lot of minority groups have previously and successfully utilized the courts. And I think it is so important that Jewish people and Israeli people, they use the courts as well. It is time that we stand up, that we hold anti-Semites accountable. This white colonizer narrative is absolutely ridiculous. My mom is Filipino, and it makes my head spin when people try to tell me, no, you're white. And I say, no, I'm part Filipino, thank you. Jews are a mixed bag, and we come from all different backgrounds, and the misinformation circulating coupled with harassment in the workplace, I think that cases are ripe. Now is the time to start filing employment discrimination lawsuits, and we'll see results. They can be quite lucrative. There's statutory attorney's fees involved. And when you're right, it sets precedent. So once one person wins, other people can point to that decision and say, wait a second, they won. I have similar facts. Let's go get them. There was actually one case, and then I promise I'll stop talking. There was one case recently that I saw from a district court, a federal district court, I'm forgetting which state, which said that saying Jewish American princess, calling somebody a Jap in the workplace, that in itself was enough to create a hostile work environment claim, believe it or not, because they analogized between the word Jap, Jewish American princess, and the N-word. And they said, if the N-word is enough in some cases to create a hostile work environment claim, this court believes Jap is enough. And that's a great case for Jews. I mean, would every judge agree with that? No, because some courts are different and different politics are involved. However, those decisions are coming out. And it's important that we keep fighting, that we hold anti-Semites accountable. And I think that we can really win this battle and turn things around.
So
Can I
before
add something?
I actually, oh, I'm sorry, Rona, go ahead.
Is that just really briefly? I'm just thinking about, first of all, Dee Dee's explanations are amazing, fantastic. You should be a guest speaker in my classes. I just want to add, so all the civil rights law that we're talking about, when we're talking about the federal law, we're talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which I think most people and most Jews don't think of it as a law for them. But we are all, I think, very familiar with sexual harassment and racial harassment, but especially sexual harassment, especially because we've all watched shows like Mad Men, where, you know, once upon a time, before Title VII and before the Supreme Court interpreted Title VII to also protect against harassment and hostile work environments, you know, harassment was very commonplace in the workforce in America, and it is now unlawful. And so if at any point in time, when someone's just kind of trying to think like, am I overreacting? Is this something wrong? First of all, certainly file an incident report with Stand With Us and go talk to a lawyer. But at the same time, I think that think to yourself, okay, if they were treating me differently in this way or harassing me based on sex, this would not be okay. And if that's where your gut is, this would not be okay, then it is likely unlawful. And it is worth pursuing. And again, like Dee Dee's saying, like we have so much case law on sexual harassment and racial harassment. And that's because of the many, many, many brave men and women who for decades have been bringing these suits through the system. And it's hard to bring a suit. And I mean, it really is. It's hard to be a plaintiff. But it is because of their bravery. And the other thing I just want to note is that, Title VII and all of the state versions of the civil rights laws are one tool, a really important tool and a really forceful tool. But we also need to recognize that we are trying to solve what is at its core a social problem. Like it is a social poison. And even though law is what we do to kind of solve it, law isn't preventing it exactly, right? Like to the extent that once we get new norms in place, then law is actually acting preventatively. But there are also other tools available. And so that takes us back to education, of course, and how we're getting to the point where people are saying these kind of horrific things and creating a hostile work environment for their colleagues and their peers.
And a lot of times, if there is no legal remedy, like for example, if someone comes to us and their feelings are really hurt and their coworkers are icing them out just because they're Jewish, but unfortunately that by itself wouldn't be a hostile work environment claim. There's a saying with the courts that Title VII is not creating a super personnel office. They're not making employers police every matter. And if somebody's feelings are hurt, that's not enough for a lawsuit. Stand With Us is amazing and unique in the sense that we don't say, sorry, talk to you when it gets worse. We're here for you. And we provide educational resources. So if there's no legal remedy, we don't leave you high and dry. We can actually help by providing education. We can go in and try to talk to your employer, explain what is and is not anti-Semitic. We can provide all sorts of booklets and tools so that you know your rights. We're here for you. We're not just a law firm. We're an educational nonprofit.
And retaliation is also protected. Sorry, last thing, retaliation is protected. So to the extent I know so many people are scared to move forward, retaliation claims are actually the most common claims because it's oftentimes that someone comes forward and complains about something unlawful going on in the workplace, and then their employer retaliates against them. And that is also unlawful under Title VII. So also just good for people to know that if you come forward and then they punish you for having come forward, that is now a separate basis for a legal claim against them. I'm also not giving legal advice, just education.
And another thing before we jump in, I'm so sorry. We're like going back and forth here. So if you do complain, make sure that you are a model employee, the perfect employee. Be on time. Don't violate stupid rules, even if you've been violating the stupid rules. Make sure that you are perfect. Because unfortunately, if an employer has something called a legitimate non-discriminatory reason, any reason you're violating a workplace policy, it doesn't matter if you complained, they can fire you for that reason. So make sure that you are an excellent model employee. Even after you complain, you are not immune from discipline if the discipline is legitimate.
And I would argue that that holds true also for our students, right? We want our students who are facing discrimination to always be holding themselves to the highest standard. So really thinking of how they're responding, really making sure to work within the framework of organizations like Stand With Us, to come to us, to our campus department, to our high school department for advice and on how to be proactive and also make sure that you are following the rules, because we don't want to be able, we don't want universities or employers to be able to say, well, you didn't follow the rules either, right? Like you broke the rules and the anti-Israel group broke the rules. So we want to make sure that we are holding ourselves to the highest standard while recognizing that other groups are not and may not be punished for it, but that's okay, because we know that when we look at ourselves and when we are coming forward with our complaints, that we've done everything, crossed our T's and dotted our I's. So before we move away from Title VII, there's a question here about how Title VII impacts members of a union. So if a union is anti-Zionist, but they're not the employer, what rules or laws apply to members of a union?
Got it. So employment law is my specialty. Believe it or not, labor law is separate. It's a completely different land. So we actually have labor lawyers in our pro bono network that we refer those cases to, because I don't want to ever give inaccurate or bad advice. However, I do know that if union employees start bringing anti-Semitic union resolutions, and ideas from their union that are anti-Semitic into the workplace, it becomes the employer's business. Kind of like what I spoke about at the beginning, where the employer has to create an environment free from unlawful discrimination and harassment. It doesn't matter where the harassment is from. That does not matter. The harassment can be from a supervisor, a coworker, or an employee or a third party. And so if someone in the union, like a union representative, comes into the employment workplace and starts saying, sign our petition for this anti-Semitic resolution, it's the employer's business, and then Title VII matters. Does that make sense? If union stuff starts bleeding into the workplace, it becomes a Title VII problem. But if it's a union-related issue, always speak to a labor lawyer who understands, and Stand With Us can connect you. It's really important to read the collective bargaining agreement. It's called a CBA. It's very case specific.
I'll add, I taught labor law many years ago. I'll just add that unions are also prohibited from engaging in discrimination. So when unions start discriminating against their members, they are breaking the law, and you will have success when you probably go and talk with a labor lawyer.
I have a brief follow-up question to both of you, Ona and Didi, because you both said something that is kind of related. And theoretically, it's fine, but practically, I'm not sure that it's fine. You're talking about the retaliation. And Rona mentioned that, everybody's, very cautious because retaliation is, they can be punished, employers, etc. But at the same time, Didi was mentioning that it's really important that you have to be a perfect model citizen, without being late or on your social media, or whatever it is. You have to be perfect. And the concern is that, fine, maybe you can't do retaliation, but I'm telling you, because I work with a lot of people in healthcare and education and this and that, and the employees, it's very, very, including myself, it's very, very scary when you're working. You don't want to lose your job or jeopardize. It's not clear cut. It's not black or white retaliation. You're fired. That's it. And or not. It could be subtle. It could be maybe they're not going to renew your contract. Maybe they'll find that you're not a perfect, they'll look for you in the dark niches of whatever and find that maybe you weren't perfect here. So these are real concerns. I've heard from physicians, from nurses. And do you have anything to comment about this?
Absolutely. So if you can show that the employer looking in the shadows to try to find something that you did that was wrong, they're really just trying to find an excuse to get rid of you, the squeaky wheel Jew, you can show that that's pretext, right? So if there's other people in the workplace who do the same thing wrong every day, let's say they clock in 2 minutes late, and the employer goes after only the Jewish person for clocking in 2 minutes late, there's a way to refute, no, their reason was not legitimate. They didn't fire me for a real reason. They're firing me because I complained about anti-Semitism. And that way to refute is showing that the employer's reason is bogus, that it's pretext. So there are ways to get around it. It's just very important that you're a model employee, because you don't want to even give them that reason, right? You don't want to even have to go and prove that the reason is pretextual for discrimination. You want to make sure that you come off squeaky clean. As far as what constitutes retaliation, it's not just getting fired. Any adverse employment action that you can tie to your protected activity, which is reporting an anti-Semitic issue at work, that's enough for a retaliation complaint. Does that make sense? So anything that alters the terms and conditions of your employment significantly, that would be enough. It doesn't have to just be you're getting fired. If they start giving you the worst shifts ever, like the graveyard shifts, and previously before you complained, it was perfect, you had your daytime shift, everything was good, that would be enough for retaliation. If you can show that the employer's action would deter a reasonable person from reporting something, that's enough. I
There are
hope
also
that makes sense.
Where a workplace also is becoming like overly hostile or just unlawfully hostile, hopefully there's more than one Jew who works there. It's good to have friends to be able to kind of band together with in bringing these suits if people are experiencing the same type of discrimination overall. I think it's also fair to be honest and say that, yeah, it is hard to be a plaintiff. And the reality is that we as Jews are living through difficult times right now. It is hard to be a student on a college campus. It is hard to be a Jewish professional who is out there being Jewish and who's being harassed at work. It is hard to be an Orthodox Jew walking on the streets of New York. And it is really hard to be a soldier fighting in Gaza or Lebanon, right? And things are hard. And these things may be hard as well. And yet, you know what? We're a people who has survived a whole lot of hard, and this too we shall overcome. And so at the very least, just because you consult an attorney doesn't mean you need to move forward, but you can at least get a sense of, okay, what are my rights? How strong is the case? How likely is it that I maybe will face retaliation? Like attorneys like Dee Dee, who have been doing this for a long time, you know, she doesn't have a crystal ball, but there's a sense to this in being able to predict it. So it's hard and it might be uncomfortable and it might make things difficult for a time, but also we need heroes out there who are going to bring these suits. I mean, we're seeing the students who are doing it on college campuses. Not every student is willing to be part of these, you know, they don't want to be named in these suits and these complaints being brought because they're scared about their futures. But some of us, you know, if you hear it inside of you that you're the one, you know, go for it.
Also, I want to add a separate entity, so not part of our legal department at Stand With Us, is called the Stand With Us Center for Legal Justice. So separate entity, not my employer, but that separate entity has something called associational standing. It's a membership organization. So that organization can shield the plaintiff's identities, which is amazing because you're able to still advocate for your rights, to hold people accountable, but you can be a part of a membership organization where your name is not on the lawsuit as the plaintiff. Instead, that membership organization is the plaintiff and it's shielding your identity. So another very interesting tool to have in the back of your head.
And I'm going to put that separate entity. I'll put the link to the website into the chat in just a moment. It's important to note that anyone can become a member of this entity. That means you, your spouse, your parents, your children, and there is power in numbers. And so there's no obligation by becoming a member. There's no financial commitment. You are just a part of this entity. So I'll throw that into the chat in just a few minutes. So I'm going to pose this question to Rona because this has come up several times in the Q&A section right now because I have personally heard her speak about this. This question has come in several different forms. It revolves around anti-Zionist Jews. So the question is, one of the challenges I see is that so many Jewish people are joining in the anti-Zionist movement, which makes it really hard to make the case that anti-Zionist or anti-Israel activities are anti-Semitic. Because they say, look, we have Jews in our movement, or we've spoken to Jews who have a different opinion than you do. This makes it different from a white supremacist movement since there are very few, if any, people of color involved. What are your suggestions in addressing anti-Zionist Jews?
Okay, so how should we address? So I think there's two different questions in there. I'm hearing a question about, okay, does the idea of the existence of anti-Zionist Jews, does that undermine the claim that Jews are facing discrimination? And I'm going to say no, it doesn't undermine it. So first of all, there are always people within every group. We talk about it as tokenization. There are people who are token members of a group and who basically go against the mainstream group and argue that no, you know, I'm a woman, there's no discrimination against women, that's not a real thing, it's fake, look at me, I've succeeded, everything's fine, right? And so with every other group, we're not the only group of people that has dissenters among us who want to essentially live by or create or espouse a different narrative than is the mainstream narrative. So those people can do that. That doesn't undermine the claim that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Now, if we look at Zionism, Zionism is very clearly a core component of Judaism. The people who don't understand that are people who don't know anything about Judaism. And there are plenty of Jews who know nothing about Judaism. So to deny Zionism as a core component of Judaism is, I mean, it's factually false. And so those people, I mean, it doesn't mean, maybe they know it's false, maybe they don't know it's false. Some of them will try and distinguish political Zionism from religious Zionism. Nevertheless, Zionism is a core component of Jewish spirituality, of Jewish peoplehood, of Jewish connection to land. And there's actually a great law review article on this written by Eliza Lewin, and yours probably also touched on this, Didi, but it talks about how and why anti-Zionism is very clearly a form of anti-Semitism because it is attacking a core component of what it means to be Jewish. So it's also true, of course, I think Yair mentioned this in the very beginning, overwhelmingly, even today, Jews in America and certainly across the world are Zionist. But even if only, I mean, we're talking 90% generally is what we believe to be true, but we are seeing some reports that younger Jews are not identifying as Zionists. So like, oh no, what's going to happen? First of all, maybe they'll grow up, maybe they'll learn something about their history, maybe they'll realize that the anti-Zionists are actually just anti-Semites, and that soon enough, being anti-Zionist isn't going to protect them from anti-Semitism. But in any event, even if it was only 50% of Jews, you know, not all Catholics are pro-life. But being pro-life is understood to be an actual component of being Catholic. So if a Catholic person is being discriminated against because they are pro-life, that is discrimination against them as a Catholic. And the same would be true for a Jew. So I don't have to prove that every single Jew and every single rabbi agrees that Zionism is a core component of Jewish identity, even though it's almost impossible to refute. Like, if there's so much deep history on this, and I can share sources on that, but I don't have to prove that everyone believes that. I, as a Jew, if that is my identity and I am being discriminated against on that basis, that's good enough. So I think that's one answer. The other answer about like, what do we do about the anti-Zionist Jews? I'm a big believer in education. I really think that this is the result of a colossal failure of American Jewry to educate our children. And it's been going on for a long time. Many of us know, I don't know the age of the people on the webinar, but like Hebrew school used to be a thing. It's barely a thing anymore. You know, like many Jews are not receiving any formal Jewish education. Many Jews don't know that they are part of a people. They think that they just have this religion, just like Christianity, just like Islam. Judaism is not just a religion. And I actually, more than anything, honestly, sometimes I get really mad at the anti-Zionist Jews because they're making it harder for us and they're giving cover to people who are trying actually to destroy us. But when I really sit back and breathe, I really feel bad for them. I really do. I feel like, wow, I have such deep pride in my Judaism and in being part of this extraordinary people who has survived as long as we have and who have reestablished sovereignty in our ancestral and indigenous home. Like, I have so much pride. They don't have that. They're like all alone. They don't know they're part of a people. They would rather hang out with people who are, you know, other groups of people who hate their people than, you know, really internalize the beauty that is being, you know, a Jew in the year 2024 after so many thousands of years of persecution and oppression. So I'm sad for them. They lack the education. They are quite simply wrong. And the fact that they're out there saying what they're saying really should not disrupt our ability, certainly not legally to be bringing suits, but also socially. I mean, we need to just really clearly say, like, that's really nice that that's what they think. And we can analogize it to other groups, because there are, even though there might not be Black people or Jews who are in Nazi white supremacist movements, there is plenty of disagreement among other groups, women, about, you know, what it means to be a woman. Like, we are not monolithic. No one is monolithic. So I think there's that piece too.
This is very powerful, Rona. And before I take the next question of Daphne, I'll just comment on what you said. Good for you for having compassion for these people, this Jewish Voices for Palestine. I'll tell you that today I was in the hospital and I was caring for a patient, and she was sick and she was like huffing and puffing and didn't look good. And she suddenly stopped and asked me, when she stopped huffing and puffing, she looked at me and she said, "Why do you have so much gray hair?" And I barely look at myself and then I looked in the mirror and a year ago, I didn't have any gray hair, or barely. And you know what? A lot of it is because I'm so annoyed and upset and angry at all these people who are causing us so much damage every single day by the cover that you're mentioning, to those people who are truly anti-Semite and truly want to eradicate us from the world. And it's horrible. But
Yeah, can I just say one thing? It's not new. And that makes me feel better also. There were Jews who were with Hitler. We have always had traitors among us, and they're traitors as far as we have always had traitors among us. And it seems to be that most of the time those traitors, after another couple generations, they're not Jewish anymore. That's why in Spain, there's so much Jewish blood they're now discovering. You know, everybody in Spain has some Jewish blood. It's the people we lost along the way. So yeah, we're going to lose some of them. And then other times the weirdest things happen. You have this anti-Jew Jew and their kid becomes a rabbi. So that's kind of an interesting story too. But yeah, I'm with you that it's hard.
So the question that I had, Daphna, who also lives in the area of Philadelphia and is an amazing activist. Some of you may know her, but she basically asked a question that is two questions in one question. And one of the first question is extremely relevant to what you just said, Rona, and all the explanations that you've been giving about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, etc. She wants to know if you stand with us or you're aware of others that can give campus school students workshops or some sort of education. Because, for example, I mean, we can spread this webinar because all your insights and Didi's insights are so important. But the question is, maybe there's something that you can do to help the students, even handouts or materials that they can feel better equipped. And then the second question that she had, and that's something that always bothers me, is, remember I told you at the beginning about this teacher who always says awful things, and she's still in the school district, but she's currently not working. She became a martyr, as Daphne said. And that's the problem. We fight with anti-Semitism, and then we hold this person again, accountable. And then the next thing you know, they're like, oh, they fired me 17 bazillion followers who are like, after them in fire and everything. So I guess these are the two portions of the question that Daphne had to all of you, Julie included.
So I would just, when it comes to student training, that is something that Stand With Us absolutely offers. We will bring training, we will bring educators and experts to any student groups and any campus or school that requests it. The biggest challenge is getting into the schools. So we are always available. The question is just, what is the best approach, either going through the school or going through youth groups to bring the kind of education that we know that our students and our teenagers and our students on campus could benefit from. So we offer, first of all, several leadership programs for what we would describe as really self-motivated teens and young adults on campus. So teens in high school who are presidents of their Jewish Student Union, who are head of BBYO, who we really see as taking the lead on bringing their peers in to be proud of being Jewish and proactive in their efforts to engage others in fighting anti-Semitism and educating about Israel. We will train them. We send them to Los Angeles twice over the course of the year. We send them back to their campuses and their schools to be leaders. And we work with them to bring the kinds of programs that they feel that their fellow students want to hear about. So we know very well, and I know myself as a mother of teenagers, that teenagers don't listen to what adults want them to hear all the time. So we know that it has to be student-led, it has to be through grassroots efforts, and it has to be relevant to the challenges that the students are facing. And if we can say anything about the last year, it comes down to the fact that we have seen an incredible Zionist revolution amongst our young people. An awakening that many of us have had has also come up through the next generation. They might be displaying it differently, they might be hearing it differently, but they are aware. And so we have to be able to give them the tools and the resources that they need as really frontline fighters in this eighth front. So the 7 fronts that Israel is facing, and the 8th front for the hearts and minds of the American people and the world. And so we will offer these resources. We offer training. We have a semester-long virtual program. We have this year-long internship and fellowship for both high school and college students. And we also have speakers and resources available. Our resources are all available online. And also we have hardcover pamphlets. So Stand With Us is actually the top producer in the world of material when it comes to Judaism and the state of Israel. So anything, answering difficult questions, how to explain October 7th, who is Hamas, know your rights, really anything that you could think of, we probably have a booklet on it. And as far as coming into the schools, Dafna had mentioned this, we have our high school manager who lives in Upper Bucks. She is available to do trainings and come into schools and work with groups like the JSUs and other BBYO and USY, any groups that are open to having her. And we also have, just in a few weeks, our top senior international educator, Charlotte Korchak, coming through Philadelphia. We are hoping to bring her into some of the local school districts. We're hoping to get her in front of crowds. So if you have groups that you think need to hear this message, students who are open to it, we will work with them. We will work with any other organization, campus organization, or school organization that is open to allowing us the opportunity to get in front of students.
And
I would also add that, oh, sorry.
No, you go first. It's okay.
Separate from, you've got, first of all, there are a zillion organizations right now that are out there. Stand With Us has been doing this for a very long time, so you can get information from them right away and you can get resources and people coming in. There are so many organizations right now. There is so much of an effort and there's so much Jewish communal money going toward basically revolutionizing Jewish education. So it is in the works and it is happening. And I'm involved with several different organizations. Club Z. So this is about now like self-help, right? You're a parent, you have your own kids. You can talk to Stand With Us and other organizations about coming into the schools, but then you can also engage and ensure that your kids are getting the Jewish education they need. So obviously there are still Jewish day schools, and I'm hearing a lot of parents who are switching their kids from public school to Jewish day school. There are also, Jewish supplemental programs. There's also this thing called Club Z, which is pretty amazing. I mean, JNF is having a conference in a couple weeks, and they have an entire separate conference for college kids and high school kids. There's so much programming out there, and it's all just kind of being rolled out really quickly. Unfortunately, our Jewish community, because we don't have a pope or a leader exactly, it's so siloed that there are so many different groups doing it, but it's all coming. And I just want to plug, because I just am such a fan, all of my kids went to Israel to study during high school on the Alexander Muss High School in Israel program. And I just want to say, and all of my kids went to Jewish day school all the way through 8th grade. They went to Israel many times with their family. They also went on trips to Israel with camp and school. Nothing compared to what they received on Alexander Muss High School in Israel program, which is a study abroad program for high school kids. And there are different length programs. And the quality of that program is so excellent. I really think it is the best inoculation, especially against becoming an anti-Zionist Jew. You want to make sure that your kid, at the very least, knows who they are and is not going to be vulnerable to indoctrination when they get to college. Alexander Muss High School in Israel.
Proud graduate of Alexander Muss, by the way.
Of course you are.
Saying, I loved HSI. It was amazing. My grandparents encouraged me to go, and I'm so grateful I did, to be able to learn about Israel's history and take your notes on a notebook. Sitting on the rock where the history just unfolded was truly magical, amazing, and it stuck with me forever. One more point. I know that we're almost running out of time here, but I just wanted to say about the the teacher who had a bunch of people viewing her as some sort of a celebrity, a martyr, because she took one for the team, whatever, social justice. There's always going to be a David and a Goliath, right? I mean, since Israel was established, it has been attacked from every single border incessantly from multiple countries surrounding it. It's never had the luxury of just relaxing and saying, I'm good now, no problem. It's this tiny little country, and it's being attacked from all over the place. And we're a small people. At the end of the day, other numbers are bigger. Jews make up a very small percentage of this world. Now is the time to be loud and proud, to know who you are, be the best Jew you can be, and understand you will be outnumbered. There are going to be people yelling. Ignore the noise, know in your heart that what you're doing is right, and stand up for your legal rights. Because at the end of the day, if you don't stand up for your rights, who will?
Excellent answer. This is an amazing panel. And we only have about 5-6 minutes or so. And I'll pop a few more questions, and maybe we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll conclude. There's a attendee that wanted to comment about Didi, that she wrote a wonderful letter to the university, to their university, and she really wanted to thank you for that. A question also for Didi. There's a teacher in a university, and she's asking about Title VII. She has sent multiple emails to the administrators, I guess HR, etc., about hostilities that she personally encountered, and no one has ever responded. what to do with these type of cases, with their lack of response indicate, deliberate indifference, and what to do. And I can tell you also from my health care center, like I told you, there was this nurse practitioner who always writes terrible things. One of the people wrote and never got any responses. So what do we do in these cases?
File an incident report. I'm here to help you. It looks better for your case if an employer ignores your concerns. So even though it's frustrating while you're going through it, you're doing the right thing by bringing those concerns to your employer's attention. If an employer's remedy is ineffectual, meaning they just ignore, liability can attach. So it's important to remember that an employer can't play dumb when you tell them, hey, these are the issues I'm having. Here's the anti-Semitic issues in the workplace. If the employer does nothing, that's an even better case for you. Bring it our way, file an incident report. We will do everything we can to help.
I want to
I'm
add also,
sorry, by the way, that you're experiencing that. I don't mean to come off as like a cold litigator and be like, yes, let's go get them. But I am sorry that you're dealing with this, and I'm sorry they're ignoring you. That is not right, and we're happy to help.
for faculty and staff at universities who also just want community around this. If you don't have community at your school, there's an organization called the Academic Engagement Network. And that organization, basically, you just have to be Zionist. You have a one-on-one interview for them to make sure you're Zionist. And then you have access to basically a community of Jews on campus, again, faculty, staff, administrators who are concerned about this. And I think that's a really helpful environment to be in.
So I want to just talk briefly about what we're seeing with the exclusion of Jewish representation in the arts, and specifically in writing, conferences, Israeli and Jewish professors being left out or uninvited as guests or panelists. And so someone asked a similar question. David wrote, I am a writer and am confronting an environment in which Jewish and Zionist writers are increasingly canceled from book events. What, both from a legal and non-legal method, are we able to address this effectively? And what can we do to combat it?
Should I start, or do you want to start? Okay, so this is a major problem, and we know this is happening in academia and in writing and conferencing, and basically, yeah, in that entire field that you're like referring to as arts, it's arts, academia. Unfortunately, the American Association of University Professors recently reversed their decades-long position on this. So it has always been the position, and this is a really important organization, that it is unacceptable to boycott professors for the country that they're from or the views that they're holding. And they just reversed it, and they reversed it specifically because of Israelis. They reversed it to basically sanction conduct that for decades they have objected to, because, and it is specifically targeting Israelis. There are those of us who are working really hard to, even if we never had connections with academics, and I think that you're seeing this in other fields as well, so also in art, also among authors, those of us who have never had connections with academics in Israel necessarily, who are building bridges right now so as to kind of fight against that. I don't know about the legal implications, so that'll be for you, Didi, but to the extent that it is lawful, this is a matter now where Jewish professors and other professors who are sympathetic to this and who do not want to be in an academic culture where suddenly you can be blackballed for being from a particular country, especially when they're doing it so inequitably, right? They're not discriminating against Arab universities, for example, that completely prohibit Jews from being involved, but they're doing it against Jewish academics at universities like the University of Haifa, which has so many Arab academics as well. It's all nonsensical, very discriminatory. So that's what we're doing right now. Again, Academic Engagement Network is a good organization to be involved with.
I think that we ran out of time. I always try to promise that. Any last comments, Didi or Julie?
Thank you so much for having us. This has been a great experience, and we're so grateful that people are interested in learning about their rights. It's very refreshing.
I just wanted to say one thing. I've been involved in many webinars, And I can tell you, and I'm getting live feedback from different people, that this has been amazing. The three of you are unbelievable. And this was such a powerful, insights to hear. And I think, I'm sure, because I already am hearing it, that perhaps if you're interested, we can have another one of these sessions, because anti-Semitism is not going to go away tomorrow or next week or next month. And we need to keep talking about it. In the same way that Daphne said, listen, we need to be educated and get some sort of a mental, equipped, some sort of a handout or something. These conversations, and many other people will watch these conversations, I think are really, really important. So I really wanted to thank all of you, Julie, for all that you're doing, Rona, for all that you're doing, and Didi. And, I'm honored to know the three of you, really.
And I just want to thank you, Yair, for all of your efforts. I want everyone on this call, to know that you're not alone, and that there is power in our collective energy in responding and fighting back and being proactive and making sure that we're standing up for our community, and that we are here to stay. We're not going anywhere, and that we are here to tell Israel's story. And so I will be in Philadelphia this weekend. I'll be doing some events actually with the lawyer that Didi mentioned, who's a constitutional lawyer. We'll be doing some events this weekend. If you're interested in attending or meeting with us, I put my email in the chat. You can reach out to me anytime. And we are here to support you. You are not alone. And there is strength that comes from speaking up and being brave. So thank you so much.
So to everybody, last thing that I wanted to say, sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions, but I did, I copied everything and I will share it with the three, Julie, Didi, and Rona. And perhaps the next time we'll start by answering some of these questions. So toda rabba, everybody, and Laila Tov. Thank you for everything.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.